Hashtag the dog who smelled the storm, my story. My name is Dr. Nathan Pierce. I'm a civilian behavioral scientist who consults for the Department of Defense, and this is the closest I've ever come to believing in something like fate. It's the story of a dog the Navy wanted to put down, and the woman nobody thought needed saving until he decided otherwise. I wasn't there for the beginning. I only know it from case files, kennel footage, and the kind of stories combat handlers tell you once they trust you enough to say them out loud. Hashtag part 1. What war left behind? Somewhere in the mountains of a province I'll just call Kundari, the wind used to howl over the dirt like it was mourning something. That's where Diesel earned his name in every sense that mattered. A purebred Belgian Malinois, 85 pounds, a bite force that could crack a femur, and a way of moving that made grown men nervous. He was a Tier 1 asset attached to a Navy SEAL squadron, and he was bonded completely to one man, Petty Officer Marcus Reyes. For 4 years, they were inseparable. Fast-roped out of helicopters together, cleared compounds together, found IEDs buried under packed earth that would have taken a platoon with them. Diesel wore tactical goggles and had a titanium cap on one worn-down tooth, a small trophy of a job that never let up. On a frigid November morning, their convoy got hit. RPGs, heavy gunfire, chaos. Reyes went down hard. Diesel didn't run. He straddled his handler's body, took shrapnel to his own shoulder and flank, and fought off every shadow that came near until the medevac finally reached them. It was too late for Reyes. He died on the transport chopper, Diesel's muzzle resting against his chest the whole way. When Diesel came home, his body healed. The surgeons at Naval Amphibious Base Ashford closed the wound in his shoulder and pulled the shrapnel from his flank. But something else in him didn't close up the same way. He was diagnosed with severe canine PTSD. The world stopped being a place he could rest in. It became a battlefield he could never leave, and without Reyes there to give him the all clear, Diesel trusted exactly no one. The Navy tried. They assigned him to Chief Warrant Officer Dale Foster, a legend in canine circles, a man who'd rehabilitated dozens of traumatized war dogs. On the third day in the kennel, Foster moved slow, kept his voice low and even, and Diesel's eyes just went flat. No warning growl. He launched straight past the padded bite sleeve and went for Foster's bare arm. It took 3 men with pry bars to get him off. Over the next 2 months, Diesel put 2 more experienced handlers in the hospital. He paced his reinforced kennel 18 hours a day until his pads bled. A dropped clipboard, a backfiring engine, a shadow moving too fast. Any of it could set him off. Captain Owen Marsh, head of the K-9 division, eventually signed the only paperwork left to sign. Class A liability. Untrainable. A lethal risk to personnel. Euthanasia, scheduled for the following Friday. I wouldn't sign off on it. I'd watch the security footage of every attack, frame by frame, more times than I want to admit. Where the brass saw a bloodthirsty liability, I saw a soldier stuck on a loop, replaying the worst night of his life every time someone in a uniform got too close. Give him to me for 30 days, I told Captain Marsh, dropping a case file on his desk. I'll take him off base, out to Solace Ridge, my facility in rural Vermont. No uniforms, no helicopters, no gunfire. If I can't reach him in 30 days, I'll put him down myself. That dog is a loaded weapon, Nathan, Marsh said. He doesn't know the war's over. If he kills a civilian on your watch, we're both finished. He saved 12 men in Kundari, I said. He's earned 30 days of peace before anyone puts a needle in his arm. Marsh authorized it reluctantly. Getting Diesel to Vermont was its own nightmare. We had to sedate him just to load the crate. By the time we reached Solace Ridge, the sedation was wearing off, and when the transport doors opened, the sound that came out of that crate wasn't a bark. It was something closer to a cornered animal's last stand. He slammed his body against the steel mesh over and over, jaw snapping, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. "Clear the yard," I shouted. Nobody makes eye contact. Nobody speaks. We got him into an isolation kennel, chain link over concrete, built for exactly this. For 2 weeks, it was a standoff. He wouldn't let me within 5 feet of the fence. He only ate in the dead of night. The clock was running, and I I was starting to prepare myself for the possibility that he really was too far gone. Hashtag part 2. The woman in the yard. Claire Whitman had nothing to do with any of this. She was 28, quiet, kept to herself, and worked as the groundskeeper and janitor at Solace Ridge. She'd taken the job for the silence of the Vermont woods. It was the one thing her own life didn't have much of. What I didn't know yet, what none of us knew, was that Claire had been fighting something of her own for 6 months. Blinding migraines, a strange metallic taste that came and went, dizzy spells that dropped her to a chair before the room stopped spinning. She'd been to a free clinic twice, and both times the exhausted doctor on duty chalked it up to stress and dehydration. She couldn't afford a real scan, so she just kept going, ibuprofen and her shifts. She knew about the dog in Enclosure 4. Everyone at Solace Ridge did. Staff were told to stay out of that whole wing. Claire had never once laid eyes on him, and she liked it that way. It was a gray, overcast Tuesday, day 18 of Diesel's 30. Foster had flown out to give it one more try, and together we decided it was time to move Diesel from the isolation pen into the open paddock, see how he handled space instead of walls. We used a catch pole and 2 Kevlar slip leads. He fought every step, claws tearing the dirt, and Foster was leaning back with his full weight just to hold the line. "Keep tension," I yelled over the snarling. We'd almost cleared the transfer corridor when a gust of wind slammed a loose shed door shut. The bang cracked across the yard like a gunshot. Something broke loose in Diesel's head. He wasn't in Vermont anymore. He was back in the ambush. He twisted midair with a violence that shouldn't have been physically possible, and the clasp on Foster's lead snapped clean under the strain. The catch pole slipped out of my hands. He was loose. Code red, loose canine. I screamed into my radio, frozen where I stood. You don't run from attacking Malinois. You stand still and protect your vitals. Diesel hit the ground running, and he wasn't running for the tree line. He went straight into seek mode. He charged a junior handler stepping out of the break room, knocked him flat to the gravel, jaws snapping an inch from his face, pinning him down with pure dominance, but somehow not biting. Foster pulled his tranquilizer pistol, but Diesel was moving too fast for a clean shot. 50 yards away, Claire Whitman stepped out of the supply shed carrying a push broom in the middle of the worst morning of her life. The metallic taste was overwhelming. Something was pounding behind her left eye. Nausea hit her like a wave, and the world went soft at the edges. She stepped onto the gravel path, rubbing her temple, completely unaware of the chaos across the yard. Diesel froze over the handler. His ears turned. His eyes, wild, bloodshot, locked onto the woman in the distance. The frenzy just evaporated, replaced by something focused, almost surgical. He left the handler where he lay and launched across the yard, dead sprint, straight at Claire. "Hey, no, Diesel down." Foster bellowed, sprinting after him. I could only watch. He was closing the distance in seconds. "Claire, don't move. Drop the broom and don't move." She heard the shouting through a fog of pain. She turned her head slow, vision swimming, and through the blur she saw 85 pounds of muscle tearing across the gravel straight at her. She should have run. Her body wouldn't let her. A spike of pain shot through her skull so hard her knees buckled. The broom clattered to the ground, and she just stood there, swaying, waiting for teeth. Diesel jumped. Foster had the tranquilizer raised, but they were too close together. A miss would hit Claire. The attack never came. Instead of opening his jaws, Diesel dropped his weight midair and slammed in her shins. Not a bite, a tactical sweep. It knocked her flat onto the grass beside the path. Before she could gasp for air, he was on top of her, but he wasn't going for her throat. He drove his snout in her chest, pinning her down, then spun and pressed his back against her side and dropped into a rigid, motionless sit. His head swiveled, scanning the yard. He let out one sharp whine and started licking her left temple, right where the pain was worst. Foster and I stopped 10 feet away, frozen by what we were seeing. Foster's hand shook as he lowered the tranquilizer gun. 20 years in K-9 units, and he knew exactly what that posture meant. "My God," he whispered. "Nathan, he's not attacking her." "Then what is he doing?" I stepped forward, and Diesel bared his teeth at me, a sharp warning bark, One paw laid protectively over Claire's arm. "He's running a medical garden block," Foster said, stunned. "We trained him for this. For when a handler goes down." On the ground, Claire's eyes rolled back. She lost consciousness, her body starting to seize. Diesel barked frantically and pressed harder against her, shielding her from everyone, refusing to let anyone near her. Hashtag part 3, the longest 3 minutes. "Call an ambulance." "Now," Foster said, low and controlled, holstering his weapon and raising both hands. "Don't make sudden moves." He's protecting her, but pushes perimeter, and his training tells him to neutralize the threat. I dialed 911 with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Priority 1, active seizure. But the real crisis was the standoff, a critically ill civilian, and her only guardian was a Tier 1 combat dog with severe PTSD. For 3 unbearable minutes, Claire seized. Diesel didn't panic. He did something I've genuinely never seen taught in any program: deep pressure therapy, draping his weight across her chest to anchor her limbs and keep her head from hitting the ground, licking the left side of her face every few seconds, right at her temple. When the siren started up in the distance, his ears pinned flat. That pitch was a trigger. Sirens meant incoming fire where he came from. His whole body coiled, a growl building in his chest. "Dale, if the paramedics run at them, he's going to maul someone," I said, panic climbing my throat. The ambulance skidded onto the gravel. 2 paramedics, Derek Holt and Priya Nandi, jumped out with a trauma bag and oxygen. "Stop right there," Foster shouted, stepping between them and the dog. "Do not approach the patient." "Sir, she's post-stictal. She needs oxygen. We have to clear her airway," Derek said, bewildered. "Get within 10 feet of her, and that dog will tear your throat out," Foster said flatly. "He's a combat-trained Navy SEAL K-9. Let me talk him down." He turned back to Diesel, dropped to one knee, and used hand signals I recognized from the case file, the ones Marcus Reyes used to use. "Tap the chest twice. Point to the ground. Stand down. Secure. Good boy. You found the threat. Let the medic work. Stand down, Diesel." Claire surfaced slowly from the seizure, a weak groan escaping her. Her eyes fluttered open, disoriented, the metallic taste in her mouth replaced by the copper tang of a bitten lip. She felt the crushing weight on her chest, the rough fur under her chin, and her fingers curled weakly into his collar. It's okay," she whispered. At the sound of her voice, everything in Diesel let go at once. The rigid tension drained out of his spine. He let out a long sigh and pressed his nose in her palm, looked once at Foster, stepped back exactly 2 paces, sat down at a perfect heel beside her head, and barked once. "Clear." Derek and Priya moved in immediately, oxygen mask vitals. Diesel watched every motion but didn't interfere. When they lifted her onto the stretcher, he stood and walked alongside it, his shoulder pressed to the rail. "He can't ride in the rig," Priya said, eyeing him nervously. "He's riding in the rig," I said, and I made sure there was no room to argue. "Separate them now, and he'll tear the doors off your ambulance, and her heart rate will spike with him. He's acting as a medical alert animal. Let him ride." She nodded. Diesel jumped into the back and curled beneath the stretcher, eyes locked on Claire's pale face the entire way. Hashtag part 4, what he smelled. At Ridgeview Regional Medical Center, the ER erupted into organized chaos. Claire went straight into a trauma bay. The staff took one look at the scarred combat dog and panicked, until Foster and I flashed our federal credentials and secured him a corner of the room. He sat there like a gargoyle, watching every monitor beep and flash, refusing to leave. Dr. Alan Kessler, the attending neurologist, ordered an emergency MRI. When the scans came back an hour later, the room went quiet. "She has a massive, undiagnosed cavernous angioma," Kessler said, pointing to a dark mass on the film, pulling us into the hallway. A cluster of malformed blood vessels pressing on her left optic nerve. It's been actively hemorrhaging, leaking microscopic amounts of blood into her cranial cavity for weeks. "That's your migraines. That's the metallic taste. Is she going to make it?" I asked. "We're prepping her for an emergency craniotomy right now." Kessler looked at us, genuinely baffled. "What I want to know is, how did anyone catch this?" She hasn't had a primary care visit in years. Foster looked through the glass at Diesel, resting his chin on the edge of Claire's bed. The dog caught it. Kessler looked at him like he'd misheard. A dog? I've heard of seizure alert dogs. Not smelling a brain bleed. He's not a medical dog, I said, my own mind still racing to connect it. He's an explosive detection canine. For years, finding microscopic traces of ammonium nitrate and copper wiring buried 3 feet underground. Human blood pooling outside a vein, breaking down, it releases specific volatile organic compounds. The second her aneurysm started to leak, the chemistry of her breath and sweat changed. To a nose trained to find invisible bombs, she suddenly smelled like something about to go off. He hadn't been attacking Claire. In his war-scarred brain, he detected an anomaly, a chemical signature of danger, and his instinct, forged in combat, wasn't to destroy her. It was to get her out of the blast radius and put his own body between her and whatever he thought was coming. The surgery ran 7 hours. Kessler's team drained the hemorrhage and clipped the malformed vessels. The entire time, Diesel sat in the surgical waiting room. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't drink. He just stared at the double doors, ears lifting every time a nurse walked out, chasing a scent he was now permanently tied to. When Claire finally woke in the ICU 2 days later, half her head shaved and bandaged, throat raw from the tube, the crushing pressure behind her, I was simply gone. The first thing she felt was warmth across her feet. She blinked against the lights, and there he was, curled at the foot of her bed, tail giving 2 soft, uncertain thumps against the blanket. "Hey, buddy," she rasped, reaching out a shaking hand. He rose carefully, threading through the 4 lines and monitor cables with the same practiced grace he'd once used to move through tripwires, and rested his heavy head over her heart with a long, contented sigh. Hashtag part 5. What he needed. 3 weeks later, Claire was discharged, but the Navy's paperwork didn't care about miracles. Captain Marsh drove up to Solace Ridge in a transport vehicle. Diesel's 30 days were up. As far as the official record was concerned, he was still government property, a highly trained, deeply unstable asset that had put 3 handlers in the hospital and cost the taxpayer a great deal of money. Euthanasia was still policy for a class, a liability. Claire met him in the office, still recovering, a scarf covering her surgical scar, Foster and I standing quietly on either side of her. "Ms. Whitman, I'm genuinely glad you're recovering," Marsh said, holding a clipboard with the final authorization. And what Diesel did is remarkable, but it doesn't erase what came before. He's proven he can't be safely integrated into civilian life. "He didn't attack me," Claire said, quiet but unshakable. "He saved my life. He caught something your best doctors would have missed until it was too late. You call him a liability because he's broken. He's not broken, Captain. He's grieving. Grieving doesn't excuse tearing open a chief warrant officer's arm," Marsh said. Claire stood and walked to the window. Diesel was out in the paddock, off-leash, chasing a tennis ball I'd thrown for him, looking for all the world like an ordinary, happy dog. "He attacked those men because they were trying to replace Marcus," she said, turning back. "Same uniforms, same commands. Every time he looked at them, he was reminded his handler was dead. I'm a janitor, Captain. I smell like bleach and cut grass. I never gave him an order in my life. I wasn't trying to be his soldier. I was just someone who needed saving. He didn't need another commanding officer. He needed a reason." Marsh looked at her, then out the window at the dog who'd survived an IED, outlasted an ambush, and guarded a dying man in the dirt of Kandari. "If you take him back to Ashford," Claire said, her voice cracking now, "you'll be killing the same hero who saved your men. Let me adopt him. I have the space. I have the time. He saved my life, Captain. Please let me save his." Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Foster, a man who rarely pushed back against brass, stepped forward. "Sir, I'm the one he put in the hospital," he said. "If there's a hearing, I'll testify for him. He executed a medical guard under extreme duress. He's not a rogue asset. He's a hero who's earned retirement." Marsh looked at Foster, then Claire, then out at the dog one more time. He set the clipboard down, took the pen from his breast pocket, and crossed out the word euthanasia. In its place he wrote, medical retirement, civilian custody transfer. You've got a lot of paperwork ahead of you, Ms. Whitman, he said quietly. He's officially discharged. Hashtag part 6. 2 broken survivors. It wasn't seamless. Diesel still had nightmares, still woke up thrashing in the dark, whining for a handler who wasn't coming back. But when he did, Claire was there, sitting with him on the floor of her small farmhouse, running a hand through his coat until the ghosts of Kundari faded. In return, he never left her. He learned the subtle shifts in her pulse and blood pressure as her brain slowly finished healing. And if she pushed too hard and a migraine started to bloom, he'd plant his head in her lap and refuse to move until the danger passed. 2 survivors who found each other on the worst day of one of their lives. Diesel, the lethal Navy SEAL K-9 the military had written off as a monster, didn't just find a home. He found a reason to keep going. And Claire Whitman, the quiet woman who almost died on a gravel path, found the most loyal guardian either of us had ever seen. I still visit Solace Ridge sometimes. I watch them out in that same paddock. No leash, no orders, just a woman throwing a tennis ball and a dog who finally has somewhere he doesn't have to be on guard. It's the closest thing to proof I've ever found that some rescues run in both directions. Asterisk if Diesel and Claire's story moved you. Hit like and share it with anyone who loves a good comeback. Subscribe for more stories like this one, and let me know in the comments what you thought of Diesel's road home. Asterisk.